Well, hello there. I'm joining you from the future right now because I actually did not have an introduction for this video because I was daft and thought that I would be able to talk concisely. And I wasn't. This is part 2 of my Confessions of a Rewatcher video, which was initially supposed to be one entire video on its own talking about both film and television. Knowing me, didn't work out that way and I had to actually split it into 2 separate halves. So this is part 2. It's my most rewatched films of all time and the films that I would most like to rewatch at some point in the near future, and I hope that you enjoy it. So now prepare to be transported to the past where I had different makeup. My hair was actually also curled, but different makeup and a different jumper on. And so let's switch back to that in 3, 2, 1. Alright, we're going to move on to most rewatched films now, and I've got my little pile of these here. The first one is one that I don't know if many people will know about or really care about, but it's actually a film that really surprised me in how much I liked it, and that is Something Borrowed. It has Jennifer Goodwin and Kate Hudson and John Krasinski, who's now one of my favourite actors thanks to The American Office, and a guy called Colin Egglesfield, who I have to admit I've not really seen him in anything else. But Emma and I went to see this in the cinema because there wasn't really anything else on, and I loved it so much that I bought the DVD when it came out. It's not your typical rom-com. It's a film very much focused on friendships and how friendships that you have when you're a child that last into adulthood change and shift, and whether or not you should really hold on to these friendships when you are not the same people anymore that you were when you were kids. It's one of these ones that if I'm just really not sure what I feel like watching, a lot of the time I'll just put this on because I never really tend to get sick of it. Next is potentially my favourite film of all time, which is Saying Something, and again this is a fairly recent film, but I don't think I will ever get sick of this. It's Silver Linings Playbook. I watched this on the plane going to Hong Kong, and then like 2 months later when I was coming home I watched it on the plane home from Sydney to Dubai. Then when I got home I went out and bought the DVD because I couldn't not have it. I loved it so much that I really wanted to add it to my collection. Watched it 2 or 3 times within the space of like the first week that I had it, and have watched it so many times since that I've lost count. I would recommend this film to anyone. I recommended it to my parents, they loved it. I took it round to Emma's and we watched it together, she loved it. It is excellent. So this will be a rewatched, one of the most rewatched films in my life, I imagine. Next up is a childhood favourite and one that I have mentioned in many videos because I love it so much, but this is Anastasia. I love this film. When I was a kid, when it came out in the cinema, I think I was probably about 7 or 8, and I went to see it twice in the cinema, which is unusual because you never usually went to see something more than once in the cinema. And I got the video for my Christmas or my birthday, something like that. Loved it, watched it to death, and then eventually when videos were no longer a thing, I went and invested in the DVD. Doesn't matter what mood I'm in, I will watch this. I know every single word to this film, I can sing along to every single song. I love the romance between these guys. They're just so cute. I am slightly in love with Dimitri. I will say that is probably where my love for John Cusack came from because I kind of fell in love with Dimitri, and this is just one of my favourite animated films of all time. Next we have a kind of like classic jokey one that I think will be probably on a lot of lists nowadays, and this is Bridesmaids. I think that the entire cast did such a good job with this and I thoroughly enjoyed it, so if I ever feel like a bit of a laugh, I will stick this on. This is Cruel Intentions. This is one of my favourite films of all time, and I know that for someone who studied film and television that might be a sad thing to say, but it really is. I just think that this is brilliant. It is so creepy and intense and ridiculous, but you cannot help but get totally sucked into the storyline. I love the chemistry between all 3 of these guys. I think they were all amazing. Yeah, watched this a stupid number of times. Another rom-com on the list. This is The Proposal. All I'm going to really say about this is that although it is one of these totally predictable films, so the minute you start watching it you know exactly what is going to happen at the end. Before you've even watched, you know, the first 15 minutes of the film, you can see how it's going to pan out. I just think it's one of the best recent rom-coms that there has been. The chemistry between these 2 is unbelievable. I wanted them to get married in real life before he married Blake Lively. I need to not invest in these sort of things. But I think that this is hilarious. I think it was really clever and witty and funny for the sort of type of film that it is, one that's quite so predictable. It's really on point. Betty White's funny, everything about it just works, so I watch this quite a lot. Cult classic now, again I think this is one that will be on a lot of people's rewatched lists, but Mean Girls. Tina Fey, Rachel McAdams, everything about this film is just insanely good, insanely quotable. Another one that you can talk along to because, well, I can talk along to it because I've seen it so many times. This is just brilliant. If anyone hasn't seen this, I'd be surprised. Next up is Harry Potter. Now I've watched all the Harry Potter films a couple of times at least, or a few times at least. This is the first part of the Deathly Hallows, is it? Yeah, this is part 1, and I actually really enjoy this film. I know that not a massive amount happens in it for the length of time that it actually runs, but I just think it's quite nice to spend a bit of time just with the characters in a more low-key kind of environment before everything all goes to pot and goes crazy in the last film. And it's Harry Potter. It is one of the most connected things to my childhood that there, I think, possibly could be. In a similar sort of book to film genre vein, this is Catching Fire from Hunger Games. I've done a sort of like mini category here before we go on to the last lot, and these are seasonal rewatches, so ones that I watch every single Christmas. So first we have Love Actually, because Love Actually is one of the most Christmassy, feel-good, cheesy, daft, romantic films that there is, and it always makes me feel Christmassy and festive. However, unlike the next film that I'm going to talk about, I do only ever watch this at Christmas time, so between late November and early January is really like the only time that I'll watch Love Actually. Whereas The Holiday, which is the next on my list, which is one of my favourite films ever, I will actually watch this not at Christmas time. I don't know why, but I don't know why I feel like this is like more specifically Christmas than this is. I think that the story of this film is just unbelievably cute. You'll notice a theme here. Not very many of the films that I rewatch are serious or upsetting films, but I guess that makes sense because they're the kind of things that you only want to kind of sit down and put yourself through once in a blue moon. Whereas if you're looking to just watch something casually and cheer yourself up, something like this is great. I think Kate Winslet's just amazing, and she's so good in this film, so this is very much one of my most rewatched films. Last in the seasonal rewatches pile we have Serendipity, which just every time I watch it just fuels my desire to go to New York more and more and more. I love John Cusack, as I said earlier on, he's just brilliant, and I love the storyline of this film. I know that a lot of people find like the middle section of this film kind of infuriating, but I sort of love it because I think I've seen it so many times now that it stressed me out the first time I watched it, but then, if you've seen it you'll know what I mean. But this is one I watch every Christmas. In addition to that, I like to watch The Muppets Christmas Carol, but I don't have that DVD over with me at the moment. And the final pile is films that I am planning to rewatch at some point soon. So we have a film from this year which I have watched 3 times, and that's just never going to be enough. This is the Veronica Mars movie with my beloved Kristen Bell. This film was as good as I hoped that it would be. I was a little bit anxious that it might not be, just because when you've loved a show as much as I've loved Veronica Mars, you do worry that when they try and tie everything up in the space of one film that it might not work, but this totally worked. I loved seeing all of the characters reunited with each other and the cast back together again. It was great. I thought it was a really clever choice of storyline. I thought Kristen was as amazing as she always is. Rob Thomas and the team did a great job with the writing, and I went to see it in the cinema, and then I've watched the DVD twice, but I need to watch it more than that because it deserves to be watched more than twice. This is a film that I adored when I was a teenager, and it just struck me recently that I haven't watched it for years, and this is A Life Less Ordinary with Cameron Diaz and Ewan McGregor and Stanley Tucci, one of my favourite actors ever. I loved this so much, and I watched it loads, and then I just seemed to totally forget that it existed, so I'm going to have to rewatch this at some point soon because it's really funny. If you haven't seen it, watch it because it's mad and quirky and daft, but it's really funny and really enjoyable. Ewan McGregor's a sort of hapless guy who kidnaps Cameron Diaz, and chaos ensues, basically. Another film that I really loved and haven't watched for years, and this is a very typical, I know that sort of film snobs will be like, oh, that's one of those films that you're supposed to like, but you shouldn't because it's not that great. Well, I've heard some people say that, but this is American Beauty. I loved American Beauty. I have seen it a few times, but not for years, like not since I was probably in first or second year of university, first time around. So I definitely need to rewatch this because I think Kevin Spacey and Annette Bening and the whole cast just do a brilliant job with it. A film that I've only seen once, but I always talk about how good this is, so I really should watch it again to remind myself of what actually happens because I've not seen it for years, is He Loves Me, He Loves Me Not, which is an Audrey Tautou film. I know that sounds weird coming out of my mouth because I always called her Audrey Tautou and then discovered that was wrong. But yeah, I loved this film. I thought it was really good. She plays a very different role in this than most of the films that she's in. She's usually the kind of, beautiful pixie-like kind of sweet character. Not so much in this one. This has got a really clever twist in it. The way that the chronology is kind of lined out in this film, the sort of timeline is really interesting. They do something very interesting with it. It's very difficult to talk about without spoiling it, so I'm not going to say any more, but I need to watch this again at some point soon. For someone who loves Disney as much as I love Disney, this is a film that I have not seen enough times, and I don't know why, because I loved it. This is Enchanted, which I just loved, and I don't know why I've only watched it a couple of times, but I really do. I've seen, it's one of these films that if it's on the TV, I'll watch just whatever bit that comes on, so just snippets of it. But I've only seen it all the way through, I think about 2 or 3 times, and so that's definitely another one to sit down and rewatch at some point soon. So I'm back again from the future. Hope that you enjoyed that video, guys, and hope that you love some of those films as much as I do. Let me know in the comments below what some of your most rewatched films are, because I really would love to know. I have a, as you can tell, really bad habit of rewatching films over and over again, but when it's a film as good as something like Mean Girls or something though, I mean, can you blame me? I hope that you're all doing really well, and I will speak to you again soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye! This is my seasons 1 and 2 Once Upon a Time box set. This show it's just blowing my mind at the moment.